Well, hello everyone. Very nice to be here with all of you today. As Chris so perfectly well presented, my name is Paul Arnesen, and I am, yes, in fact, a global HR strategist. That's usually the easiest way to mention what I do and what I think about. But in general, for the last decade or so, I've been working mostly with organizations globally, helping them navigate international challenges within the workforce. So anything that has to do with getting the right people into the organization, regardless of where they're coming from, culturally, globally, or just in terms of diversity. So there's a lot of things that is interesting when it comes to this topic. So if everybody is ready, I hope that my slides are visible. We're just gonna jump straight into it, and I'm happy to take any questions as we move along, and we will take them at the end, obviously, as I know this presentation goes. So before we start, I want you to think about a quick little question, and that's: how can we transform cultural differences into a competitive advantage in our increasingly globalized workplace? What I'm talking about here is a globalized workplace. I'll get into a little bit what I mean specifically about that, but there is things that is going on in around the world that means that the companies that we work for today, the companies that we run and operate today, are more and more exposed to global people from different cultures. This is where cultural agility comes into the question. And cultural agility is not just about understanding diversity, it is about leveraging it. Right? So it helps us to adopt and integrate and work more effectively across different cultural environments, better communication, better collaboration, everything. I'll get into the definition a little bit more as we start here. So how can we use e-learning, and how can e-learning be a catalyst for developing this skill? I call cultural agility a skill. So we're going to look at, as mentioned earlier, personal learning paths. We're going to look at what interactive simulations is and how some social learning platforms can help, facilitate this cross-cultural exchanges. So that's my aim today, and let's see where it takes us. So just to get you a quick overview of what I'm going to go over, first, just define cultural agility, if that is a term that might be strange for many of you. We're going to look at why it's important to have cultural agility as a skill in your company today, in a global team. We're going to look at how e-learning is going to be part of helping us, make sure that we get cultural agility integrated into learning and development strategies for your companies. I'm gonna explore the strategy a little bit, and at the end I have a small case study of a project I did where I actually had the opportunity to create some e-learning slides and projects and plans for a company. Okay, so let's move straight into it. Cultural agility. So what is cultural agility? When I talk about cultural agility, and if you have any experience in cultural learning, cross-cultural practices, management, communication, a term that is often used is cultural awareness. When I talk about cultural agility, it's important to set that apart from cultural awareness, because cultural agility is the skill to swiftly, comfortably, and effectively engage and work with people from diverse cultural backgrounds. So it's not only understanding a different culture in theory, it is about getting what you know about the culture and applying this knowledge to enhance communication, collaboration, and interaction. That means that cultural boundaries that exist today within companies will be lowered. So it'll be easier, quicker with cultural agility to interact with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different countries. So I talked a little bit about earlier why the global environment today is something that we need to consider when we talk about cultural agility, and why it's becoming more and more important. We work today without geographical constraints. So teams are increasingly diverse, clients are global, projects, they frequently can span multiple cultures, multiple countries. You can have your business set up in the US, but you work with a company in Japan, you work with a company in Germany, South Africa, Brazil, This is the world we are living in today. There's really no boundaries for business. Of course, you have the small mom and pop shops that is operating locally. They sort of work there, and that's okay. But sometimes they also have to deal with vendors that deal with partners that are also global and culturally different than what they're used to. So we have a monoculture and we have a multicultural companies. We talk about the multicultural in this setting. So we have something today that is going on around the world, which is global mobility. And when I mention global mobility in this setting, I want you to pay attention a little bit of what is going on around the world in terms of migration. Migration is not something new in the history of humanity. People have moved from country to country. That's happened all across the lifespan of humanity. But recently, obviously, media is showing a lot of not only media, but it's the reality that we see in media, that there's a lot of immigration, it's a lot of legal migration happening, also a lot of illegal immigration happening. I think it's sort of the nature of the world we're living in. There's conflicts going in some part of the world, and people are moving more or less more than they used to, and we see it's very visible. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a personal sort of, it's not an experience, but a personal observation. So I live in Italy. I'm not Italian, I'm actually Norwegian, but I live in Italy. And Italy, for those who know, is a global powerhouse when it comes to a lot of industries. For example, there's a huge manufacturing industry in Italy, especially in the north where I live, Milano. You have a lot of the car industry, automotive industry is massive up here. You have a pharmaceutical industry that is big. You have obviously the agricultural industry. Who doesn't know about the Italian food? And you have the healthcare. It's not the industry, but the healthcare needs of a country, an aging population. Italy is one of the oldest populations in the world after Japan, actually. So there is a crisis looming in terms of having enough people working in all those industries I just mentioned. And one of the reasons for this worry that there won't be enough people to fill the open positions is that productivity will go down and the economy might crash. So of course, in a short run, everything looks to be okay, but in the long run, there might be an issue. One of the problems here in this economy is that a lot of the young Italians that are used to working in Italian business culture in terms of communicating well, negotiating with people, doing business internally, locally, and everything, they are now looking at going outside of Italy to find work. There's a brain drain going on. So companies now, to a bigger extent than before, is looking at finding people to employ the much needed positions that are open, the open position in this company. The agricultural industry is going to suffer if they don't have enough manpower to actually be there on the fields and help out when it's needed, or work at the factories and do all that. So they're looking at the migration, or they're looking at finding people from outside to come to Italy to find job. Then you have the thing about cultural agility that comes in. How does someone who comes from a different culture integrate quickly enough to be able to function productively, efficiently within an Italian company when they never worked for an Italian company? They might be coming from a completely different business environment. So the one thing they should have then is some sort of cultural agility. They don't necessarily have that from the beginning, but we can train that. So companies today, they need to have some sort of programs in place to employ those people that they need. For example, nurses that are coming in to work for a hospital, that they have some sort of onboarding process that is building cultural agility so they can quickly adapt to dealing with the people that come to that hospital that are mainly older Italians and all that. At the same time, the companies that are employing these people need also to have an understanding of what it means for them to manage someone from a different culture. So these things is something that is happening now, and it's happening not only here in Italy where I am, but it's happening globally. There is a migration of workers coming into different countries. The best thing for an economy is to try to get them to work as soon as possible, especially in countries where there is a brain drain, where people are leaving. So basically there's a net, there's a minus of people getting into the workforce locally, and you have to sort of supplement that with people from the outside. In terms of thinking a little bit about how to bring it down to a little bit more practical in a business sense, is to think about cultural agility in the ways of how you work together as teams. So you might have a team in North America, maybe in Europe and Asia. And if you collaborate today by having a strong understanding of cultural agility, or having a cultural agile team or teams, means that you on each participant that comes from different cultures, that bring a unique cultural perspective, a unique business practice and communication style, can better overcome differences, and they can foster a mutual understanding, collaborate more effectively towards a shared objective. This is something that can just make your business grow faster, because you don't have that initial cultural difference that sort of creates some sort of boundary that doesn't exist. It exists, but it doesn't. You might not think that it's there, but it's there because we are all very different people. It doesn't have to be just someone from a different country, but to have an understanding and quickly adapt. So if we go to the next slide here, we're going to look at how you can now use e-learning to build cultural agility, and why e-learning or training in a virtual setting is actually very efficient when it comes to this. Because when we're talking about intercultural workplaces, it could also mean that if you have a local company today, you might have an idea that you want to scale that company to go to another country one day, and maybe you want to go there and do business. Maybe you want to find a vendor in another country. So just to have the training built for your business, even though it's local today, can be beneficial for the future. So when we're looking at cultural agility and e-learning as a transformative tool, and to enhance this skill, there's three aspects that support cultural agility, and that is scalability, personalization, and accessibility. So scalability means that if you are a small company today, you create the training or the learning program locally, but then in next year or in a couple of years, you have decided to expand the company. Maybe you merged with another company from another country, and then you can basically scale that training quickly, because you don't have to develop something for that new country. You can do that virtually in one place. It's easy to scale up an e-learning program. So there's no constraints on physical classrooms, for example. Schedule is synchronized. Every team member, no matter location, has access to the same learning resources, and it's easy to just like copy that to be used in different locations around the world. The second part is the personalization. I will go a little bit more into personalization in the next slide, but I want just to mention it quickly that personalization when it comes to e-learning means that you can fit individual needs and learning pace. So you can create content that reflect the diverse background of someone. So a learner might have a different style of learning. Like one person from one country might have an experience of learning in a collective setting, and someone from another country might be very individualistic. They want to just be left alone. So you can create different personalized learning programs depending on where someone is from and their background. And this is good for professional interactions. I will get a little bit back to that on the next slide. And the last part is about accessibility. Obviously, as I said, again, there's no time zones, and availability will be 24/7 when it comes to e-learning programs. So when you have a global workforce in different time zones, you don't have to have them to come into one location and do the training. They have access to that training wherever they are based. And you can also create different training programs for different languages. Even if you have a global team, there might not be an expectation that everybody speaks the same language as you. You might have a manager that you speak to that speaks the same language as you, but maybe the manager has some people working for them that speaks a different language. They also need training. So you can create training that is also accessible for them, because you can do it virtually. Okay, so as I mentioned, personalized learning paths. And I think this is something that is a strategy that is very interesting when it comes to building cultural agility. Because as I said, each of us learn differently, and the paths we can create can meet unique styles and needs. And we can adapt them to include cultural nuances that are essential, especially when you're interacting in a global stage. So it's not just about making learning engaging, it's like how to make it relevant, more relevant and effective, especially when you have a diverse workforce. So if you use tools like iSpring, for example, they have the iSpring suite. You can create and design different like branching scenarios that are tailored to specific cultural context. Imagine a scenario where an American company has maybe a sales team and they want to explore going to Japan to do some business. So you can then create a training for that American sales team about Japanese business etiquette. So you can develop that quickly and it's personalized for those Americans. So it has like the awareness of how they, as a born and raised in a culture in the US, how they perceive the world around them, what kind of things that motivates them. And then the training is like developed for them, but is looking at Japanese business etiquette. If you have a venture in Japan already, or maybe the parent company is in the US and you have a subsidiary in Japan, you can also do the same the other way around. So you create then a training for the Japanese team that is looking at American business etiquette. So you can create different training modules, different training programs that is catering to different specific needs, and then you can train them on different corporate cultures, business scenarios, and everything like that. When you do this, the cultural understanding goes into the heart of the learning material. It means that the course you develop is based on culture. So you're not having a specific training course that is just for one country. Like, it's very easy. I talked about that earlier, the scalability of this. It's easy to fall into a trap, I would say, that you create a training program, especially in an onboarding stage of a company or an onboarding stage for an employee, that you have one training program to say, okay, this is how we work in this company, but maybe because you haven't personalized it. But if you personalize it, you can create, this is how we work in this company as an example, in the US. This is what you have to think about when you work or communicate with our subsidiary in country XYZ. So you create these personalized learning paths that meets the individual cultural needs. Interactive simulation, this is also something I think is very, very, very effective, especially when you have virtual learning programs, as an e-learning program is, because what we that work in cross-cultural practice training and cross-cultural management practices, we often say that one of the best ways to learn about working and living in a different culture, especially when we talk to expats that are going on a foreign mission, is to go to a country and live there for a few months to really experience that culture. That is the purest interactive experience. But as you might think, this is very expensive. It is time consuming, and it's actually, the success rate is a little bit lower because you might have someone after 3 months that says, I don't like it, I want to go home. So to have an interactive simulation where you actually have people on the other side of the screen that is from a specific culture, you can train interacting with them directly. As an example, if you use something like, again, iSpring, another one is Storyline, I think it's called, you can create this simulation that are very close to real life. So an example will be a German business professional. He's negotiating with the potential partner in China. So in that simulation, you have the German sitting, and on the other side of the simulation on the screen, there's someone from China that is the person, the Chinese person they're going to interact with. And in the training, you can give them different responses. As a German has to choose different responses based on the understanding of Chinese business etiquette. And those choices leads to various outcomes, and then teaches that person, the German, then to understand better what is the best outcome I can do? And you can imagine the impact of having this interactive simulation before going on maybe a short-term business trip to another country where you've never been before, where you can try to understand a little bit of the things that makes the other person really like you as maybe a person or as a professional, and these things that sometimes can go really wrong if you have no idea. So it's sort of like just putting it into the perspective of the person before you go, because you can interact in a virtual way. Another really important and interesting, an interesting way of using interactive simulation that I actually have worked with some clients of doing is in customer service. Because in customer service, this is not only when it comes to people from different countries, this is also when it comes to people within the same country. So if you have interactive simulations and a customer service agent is then training on how they will interact with someone who calls in or interacts even on text-based customer support, to give them the answer in the way that that person on the other side likes it. This highly improves the success rate of a problem in customer support. An example of this is that if someone from a culture that is very direct, typically a German culture or the Dutch, they might call into a customer support center, and of course this is going to be in English then, but then they want to have a reply to some issue. If the customer service agent is following a script that is just universal, they might end up annoying that Dutch person, because in the Dutch culture, they want to go straight to the point. They don't really like to beat around the bush. So if the customer service agent have on the screen the IP address saying, oh, this person is calling in from the Netherlands, okay, let me change my approach a little bit to try to be more accommodating to them. The same could happen if someone, say, from a culture such as one of the Arab countries, like you can do Egypt, where the relationship is important. So maybe you want to start, if you're the customer service agent, you want to start with a little bit of conversation and to have like an idea of the person you're talking to, because then they feel more relaxed and they're happier in the interaction. It's a very good way of using interactive simulation in a cross-cultural setting. Next here is social learning platforms. When I'm talking about social learning platforms in this sense, we are not talking about Facebook, TikTok, and Snapchat as a social platform. We are talking about the tools that you use today within your company. If you are using such tools as Microsoft Teams or Slack or something, you have ways of communicating with your team members, or the teams have ways of communicating with each other in a virtual way. It's actually pretty much a perfect opportunity, actually a unique space to interact with someone from a different cultural background where you work. So you can imagine a platform where team members from various parts of the world can share articles, they can share videos, they can share personal insights about their culture. For example, a team member in India might post an informative article about business etiquette in India, while someone from Brazil might share a funny video of Brazilian negotiation style. And when you have all this sharing within the teams that you already work with, it's an exchange that broadens everyone's understanding and equips them to engage more respectively and effectively across cultures. And this is not only about like posting and commenting. Using this platform, like creating channels, for example, that is like dedicated to specific regions of the world where you can share specific information, creates an ongoing dialogue that makes it easier to deepen cultural comprehension, and you can develop some empathy by having a little bit of understanding of where people are coming from. Okay, let's see, are we good on time? So let's see the next. Yeah, so we are over to the case study. So I did a project. It was actually an American company that reached out to me. I'm Norwegian, as I mentioned earlier. So this American company reached out to me and asked me, do you have an opportunity to help us a little bit with some communication issues with our Norwegian parent company? So this engineering company it's a Norwegian company. They create parts for the aerospace industry. So the American counterpart is in Florida. The problem here was that they were expanding in the US, hiring a lot of new people coming in as engineers in the US branch that never had worked with anyone from Norway before. And what essentially had happened is that when the Norwegians started the company a few years ago, they just sent someone that the owner back then had gone to university, so they had a good personal relationship, over to the US to open the company branch there. And everything was working out fine until they started to expand. And then all of a sudden, there was some breakdown in the way they communicated on projects. In essence, what happened is that when a Norwegian think about a project, they will give a deadline and they will let the person just deal with that project in their own time. That's the way all Norwegians are learned in school, that we have something that is called with freedom comes responsibility, meaning that you give me a task, let me do it in my time, and I will deliver on the promise. An American, depending on a little bit where they're coming from, but in essence, they like to have a little bit more micromanaging, maybe you can say, or like milestones, and they want to have more follow-up on what they're going on. So there was some confusion when projects were given from the Norwegian parent company to the US that there was no feedback given. So what we did there to help them was that we created a very simple learning platform that they could scale up if they wanted to employ more people in the future. We set up some interactive simulations and created some virtual workshops. Just to tell you how it really worked in a technical sense. So the interactive simulations was basically me being the counterpart. So I was then interacting with the team in the US. They had a way to communicate with me, and I tested them on different things, and they had like an understanding of how it was to ask questions, and I responded. And then there was a learning. So we basically had this kind of workshop where I was interacting with them. And also we did the same for the Norwegians, where I was then got into the role of an American. I have a good understanding of American business practices. So in the end, we created this kind of workshop that was also a interactive simulation where I recorded some videos for them that they can use in the future. We created a learning path that they went through. This is all part of the onboarding process for new joiners of this company now. And they have virtual workshops that they can implement when they need to. That is all created for them. The outcome of this obviously was actually very, very positive. The misunderstandings decreased, communication became clearer and more effective. And it was basically just that the understanding of how projects were given, how projects were delivered, and the expectations of how projects should be done, that was sort of solved. Could we have done this in a different way? I'm not sure. I think that the feedback was that the interactive simulations was really something that the company in Norway didn't really have time to set up this training for themselves. So what we did when I did this is that I had this, then all of a sudden they had this tool that they can give quickly to their new joiners. So as I said, all the projects now all of a sudden had much more efficiency. They got the projects running. The Norwegians weren't frustrated because of the lack of progress, and the Americans weren't frustrated because they didn't know what was going on. So there was like a meeting in the middle for everyone, more cultural awareness of the Norwegians, more cultural awareness of the Americans. And one of the other feedbacks I got was that the teams now had like much more better understanding of each other. And when they had like a meetup in person, the stories they could tell each other was related to the things they had heard about people from different cultures, and they could sort of laugh about it and have a better understanding. And you just became better friends. It was like you had already a knowledge of someone. They weren't a stranger anymore. They were not only colleagues, but they were like colleagues that had a different way of interacting, a different way of thinking, and different way of looking at life. And so it just became a lot of curiosity that turned into a really good team in the end. And it still is going well. So I just hope that everything is going well in the future. But now they have the training and everything should be fine, hopefully. Okay. That was basically that part of the presentation I had. I'm going to summarize quickly my key points. So cultural agility, as I said, is not only about the awareness, it's how you use the knowledge that you have about a different culture and you adapt yourself, and you can sort of put theory into practice. and how this is now important for global teams. Obviously, as I said, there's a huge need in a lot of economies to employ people from outside of their own country. There's a huge lack of in healthcare industry. There's going to be an epidemic eventually about nurses that needs to come in, doctors. There's a huge need for this. So I think that cultural agility is going to be more important than ever to make sure that this is efficient. You can use e-learning for this as a role of e-learning. It's scalable. You can personalize it, and it's accessible for everyone. You can make it in different languages. These e-learning strategies, as I talked about, the way of creating individual learning paths, interactive simulation, and also using the tools you already have in place is something that you should definitely look into. And then the case study, as I said, was something for me showing that it actually works out well, even for a small company. Okay, so what you can do next, as we have mentioned earlier, please check out my website if you're interested in learning more about me and what I do. There's a QR code there you can scan, but my website is paularnesen.com. Obviously, in LinkedIn is a good place to reach out to me as well. And I think now for the next step that you can think about is the trying to start with identifying if there's any cultural competencies your team needs, focusing on their roles and the nature of their interactions with diverse teams. Look at what kind of tools you can use. Is interactive simulation something for you? Do you just want to have a learning path that personalized? There's different learning environments that you can use as different tools out there. Develop the content based on your industry, your business, your people. Develop custom content. Encourage people, use your social platforms that you have, ask people to participate, get feedback from learners. It's all about involving the others. And yeah, I think that's it. As I said, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to jump on a call for half an hour to just discuss your needs and maybe some concerns you have for your diverse team. So yeah, I think that was it. If there's anything now, I think it's time for questions or thoughts or yeah.
Super. Paul, thank you so very much. I'm so glad we had this presentation. That's actually the first time in 3 years of iSpring Days when we have a dedicated session on adapting your e-learning content for the global team's needs. So I would consider that to be a great start for further intercultural topic coverage in iSpring Days agenda. So thank you so much.
So yeah, thank you for having me. And yeah, it's a topic, as you maybe heard, I'm very passionate about, and I think it's something that the world needs to see as a way of creating competitive advantage for companies. We are a global world. We are not unique.
Let's actually ask our participants in the chat, the strongest one who survived and is still with us. We still have more than 150 people watching us that late in the evening in Europe, middle of the day in the US. It would be interesting to hear in the chat if you guys are already working in a global team or maybe planning to work in a global team. And that includes, of course, remote workers, not only the ones who go to the same office as you do. So it would be interesting to hear if you guys are already a part of a global team. But so far, while the guys are answering, I would like to ask a question that came from Audrey. Audrey is actually an exceptionally active person in our chat, asking very, very insightful questions. The question is as follows: what are the common challenges that companies face when teams come from different cultural backgrounds when they work together?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know.
So there are many challenges. If I would just point to one, to not spend like a long time discussing, because there's many challenges. But I think when you're dealing with people, it's all about how you communicate with them, especially when it comes to feedback. A lot of people from some cultures can really be demotivated if you don't understand how to speak with them. I'm not saying you should cuddle them, but it's almost like if you have a direct way of communicating yourself as a leader, because that's the way you talk to your parents growing up and the parents talk to you, and then you have someone who comes from a very opposite, where it's more indirect, you're more, I wouldn't say polite, but it's almost like you're hiding the fact, that the truth, and it sort of takes time to get to the point. You might have some problems because you want to give proper feedback to people. And I think sometimes you have entire like you have really good people coming, like foreigners moving to a different countries to work, that gets demotivated after the first feedback session because they feel unfairly treated because it wasn't what they expected, although the intention the manager had was good. It's just the way you communicate. So communication of everything is the most of the time what I see, at least.
Yeah, I would totally agree that those are amongst the top challenges that intercultural teams face. And I think it's critically important that our audience is so well prepped, and they've been answering my question in a very specific fashion. Some of them were answering, we're not working globally, but we are very intercultural, which highlights the very core idea of the intercultural communication concept. You might be coming from the same country, but you may be culturally diverse. And this also requires special attention, and this also requires cultural agility, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and also, as I mentioned in the presentation, there's very few places around the world now that are monocultural. You
Absolutely.
have when I went to school 34 years ago now, like back then, maybe to have someone from a different country in your class was a little bit strange, but today it's very common that you have someone that is not born and raised in your country come in, and then companies today see the same thing, especially in Europe. Europe is a place where people move from country to work all the time, so you can be a German company, you can be a French company, a Spanish company,
Mm,
but you have someone from a different culture totally within that company. Happens all
exactly.
the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would love to continue this conversation with you. I know I love chatting with you, Paul. So I think we will have no chance, but we need to continue this discussion, maybe outside the framework of iSpring conference, but we will do that. And we'll leave the participants and the attendees, those who are currently with us and those who will watch us in the recording, with a nice feeling of an open window with an unfinished discussion so that they can come for more, shouldn't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. Please
Uh,
check out my website, and there's a coming up soon a call with you, Chris. So hopefully
mhm.
we look forward to sharing that with the world.
Yeah.